And there you have it. We knew that faith would be a significant part of this convention, with Donald Trump making his first appearance before his supporters, before this country, since what we watched unfold on Saturday evening. John Santucci, I wanted to ask you about something you and I had talked about earlier in the reporting about how this has truly affected Donald Trump. You had some insight into what it was like, those moments in the motorcade as he left the rally. You know, he did the fist bump. We all saw that iconic image of the blood coming down the side of his face. But that trip to the hospital, what that was like for him, not having any members of his family, his adult children in that car with him, unable to reach them, went to the hospital to get a CAT scan, and how that has changed him. And you can really see it on display here tonight in Milwaukee.
Yeah, David, sources close to Donald Trump were texting me, looking at the image the same way all of us were, reacting that, wow, this really has impacted him. And David, I can tell you from conversations I've had over the years, mortality in Donald Trump does weigh on him. And especially when his first wife, Ivana, died just 2 years ago this weekend, David, he was despondent, really talking about how much he missed her. And his children, even Eric Trump, David, observed to me just this morning, they firmly believe their late mother was looking over their father this weekend in Pennsylvania, David.
Martha Raddatz, you and I were talking about the adult children. We're watching Donald Trump here. We'll stay on these live pictures. But when we first saw Don Jr., Eric, his wife Lara earlier today, there you see some images there, the interaction with the children. These were children who could not reach their father in those first moments after we all saw that video cross the wires on Saturday night.
And they had not. They had not seen it live or a few minutes later after the rally. They really didn't know at that point how he was doing. You can see Eric Trump there walking out.
That was earlier today when they came down to put him over the top in Florida. Remember, they gave the...
And you and I were both struck by that moment, that the excitement and the energy as they walked in. We're back live there, of course, with Donald Trump walking out, talking to supporters. But knowing that just a little more than 48 hours ago, and it was less than 48 hours when the adult children first came out, what they had gone through, whatever your politics are, whatever you think of Donald Trump, those adult children, that was a horrific time for them. I kept thinking of Ronald Reagan in 1981, the assassination attempt then, and Ronald Reagan waved when he got back in his motorcade, but we learned later he had been shot, and it was a serious injury. So there was a period there where we weren't certain about how Donald Trump had fared, and the children, the adult children, certainly felt that as well.
Linsey Davis, you were describing the humility, the modesty you saw, perhaps a slightly vulnerable Donald Trump tonight, and that is something that will land with people who are watching, whether you support Donald Trump politically or not.
The experts have said that the way you communicate, more than 70% of it is nonverbal. And it would appear that without Donald Trump even opening his mouth tonight, he has said a lot. At the same time, I'll just go from a quote from J.D. Vance in his book, Hillbilly Elegy, where he says, I don't believe in transformative moments, as transformation is harder than a moment. So we're going to have to see what happens, obviously, in the days and weeks to come here. But it's not lost on me that less than a mile away from here at a hotel in 1912, it was here in Milwaukee when Teddy Roosevelt, the attempted assassination on his life, and it was that iconic moment for him. Of course, he didn't go on to win, but it was a moment that certainly was iconic, and people were reminded of his toughness. He, of course, went on to give that speech that day after he had been shot in his chest.
It weighed heavily then. These moments weigh heavily on the American people, as they should. And I think that we've heard from the Trump campaign and certainly from the Biden White House a call for unity to denounce political violence. Something that was really interesting, John, was that I heard you ask former President Donald Trump about the phone call with President Biden. We heard President Biden come out publicly and say it was brief, but it was good. And I would have to believe that the American people, again, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, need to hear that. And you heard from the former president something very similar.
He said it was a nice, very nice call, but he said Joe Biden couldn't have been nicer. And I just can't imagine hearing those words coming out of his mouth. I mean, these were two men that refused to shake hands at the start of the debate. But he, I asked him if this experience had changed him, and he said, he said, I don't like to think about it that way, but yes, this has clearly had an impact. And tell you that the biggest thing I noticed tonight is there was no talk tonight about stolen elections, about J6 hostages and heroes, January 6th hostages and heroes. It was a very different tone. Will it last? I mean, I don't know, David. I don't know. I do remember one other time when his tone changed. And that's when he first met Barack Obama after winning in 2016. And he looked humbled. He praised Obama. And within 2 days, you know where it went.
The fighting instincts, the political instincts kick back in.
Yeah.
We know Mary Bruce watching this as well, our chief White House correspondent, at the Biden campaign watching this very closely, the president being briefed certainly on what night one has brought before the American people. We heard about inflation. We heard from the head of the Teamsters about the American worker. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow for the Biden campaign, given the fact that we know President Biden, the first president to publicly walk a picket line. That's going to be a challenge for them going forward. Still no formal endorsement, but nonetheless, what's the Biden campaign saying about night one here?
Well, in a word, David, a campaign source just said their reaction, hollow. They are arguing that all of this outreach that we are seeing tonight to young voters, to workers, to Black and Latino voters especially, that this is nothing more than empty gestures. The Biden campaign feels that Trump doesn't have any substance, any policy, any real toothsome agenda to back this all up. In fact, quite the opposite, they say. We have heard the president argue that, in fact, Donald Trump's policies and another Trump administration would actually make things worse for these groups that they are trying now to court. The Biden campaign tonight is hoping, and they are optimistic, that when the president gets out there, as he continues to sell his plan, the voters will see through the Trump agenda and ultimately go for Biden. David.
Mary Bruce tonight. Mary, thanks so much. Just a few seconds left. Let's get to Rachel Scott on the floor. A remarkable tone set on night one. John Carl asks the central question, does it continue all 4 nights?
Certainly, former President Donald Trump is setting a new tone. Just 48 hours after surviving that attempted assassination, the former president coming back here before his supporters, showing this sort of defiant fighter image, unbound. That is something that the former president, we are told, is now roping into his speech that he will be delivering in just a few days here at the RNC, David.
Rachel Scott on the floor of this convention hall. Rachel will be there every single night for us. We want to show the audience that image, that central image of the evening on night one of the Republican convention. Donald Trump entering this convention hall at the top of the hour, holding his hand up. You can see the bandage on his ear. We saw that video, that moment of him walking out, the crowd erupting into applause. And then we all took note of something here in the broadcast booth, how the whole convention center went quiet, studying the former president in what was a very human moment after what we all witnessed.